Are we ready to go?
All right, welcome everyone to our informal brown bag lunch on Earth Day +1. My name is Bob Gallagher. I know many of you from my work with Waterkeepers, with the League of Conservation Voters, Scenic Rivers Land Trust, and other environmental groups. We're all frustrated at the inability of world and national leaders adequately to address the climate crisis. At the national level, we're working desperately to recover from 4 years of disastrous environmental policy in Washington. But the story here in Annapolis is really different. Major changes during the 2017 elections brought us an administration and a city council that have elevated and engaged on environmental issues to an extent that I've never seen before. These contrasting views of the environmental worlds were illustrated by 2 columns in yesterday's Capitol newspaper. On the front page, former Senator Gerald Weingrad described how he's more pessimistic than ever about the state of the environment. I think he's talking about more globally and nationally. And then in the guest column, on the opinion page, our own Jackie Guile, the city's deputy city manager for sustainability and resilience, who I think is also on the call, went through an upbeat list of exciting accomplishments that we've seen here in Annapolis. So today our goal is to review local accomplishments and where we need to go from here. To do that, we bring together Gavin Buckley, Rob Savage, Randy Rowell, and we can have Mitchell or Jackie, whoever else would like to chime in, do that as well. Mayor Buckley hardly needs an introduction. He's everywhere. It seems like he's often in 2 or 3 places at the same time. Everyone has heard him speak or read about his unique vision of environmental stewardship, prosperity, and livability for all Annapolitans. I would describe Rob Savage as the leader of the environmental caucus of the city council, if we had one. He's on the Environmental Matters Committee. He's got a degree in environmental sciences, worked as in environmental positions in and out of government. And you may recall that Rob established his credibility beyond doubt several years ago when he quit his environmental job with the city in protest over the city's failure properly to enforce environmental laws. Randy Rowell is not on the city payroll. He's got a master's degree in natural resources. He worked at DNR. He's now at the prestigious Chesapeake Research Consortium. He's a founder of Replant Annapolis. He's a member of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. And he's particularly interested in growing environmental awareness and engagement among young people and in environmental justice and social equity. As you can probably tell from my introductions, I'm not a disinterested observer. I don't claim to be perfectly objective or detached on these subjects. I think each of these people here today has made an unprecedented commitment and delivered results for Annapolis and for our environment. Of course, we all know that there is much, much, much more that needs to be done. And there'll be extensive debates, disagreements, and arguments over what the priorities should be and what the strategy should be. Those debates and disagreements are fair game for discussion today, and we invite polite discussion and disagreement and your questions and comments as we go through the hour. So I've asked each of these heroes, I'll call them, to take a few minutes to review from their unique perspective, legislative, executive, outside the government, what's been accomplished in the last 3 or 4 years, and what are the priorities going forward. So we'll begin with Gavin and then go to Rob and Randy, and then we'll turn to your questions. You can pose questions on the Facebook page in the comment section, or if you have trouble with that, you can mail them directly to me, riverkeeper113@verizon.net. So with that, Mr. Mayor, it's all yours.
So welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and be part of this. I think we are a green city, and I think we're a green city with a self-esteem problem. I think we should be proud of the amazing work that we are doing and the direction that the city is going. And I'm proud to partner and take Rob Savage's lead on so much of this stuff. But we are going to be in the forefront of resiliency, environmental justice. We truly are a city that has a conscience and is really working towards setting a standard, I believe, in the country. People are going to be looking at the initiatives that we have done. So happy Earth Week. And I'm sure we all recognize the need to focus on the environment at times other than on one day or 1 week or a month or a year. Here in the city of Annapolis, we put a lens on the environment in all the things that we do. It is why we elevated Jackie Gild to the position of Deputy City Manager for Sustainability and Resilience. We want to ensure that we are exceeding our goals. In her position, Jackie ensures that there is an environmental component to all things. Are we upgrading our fleet of vehicles in the right way? Are we using the right weed removal techniques in our Recreation and Parks Department? Are we planting enough trees? Is our stormwater strategy in compliance in city, residential, and business construction projects? There can be an environmental overlay in nearly everything city government touches, and that is why Jackie's role is critical to our operation as a city. Municipalities are often slow-moving ships. A mayor gets a chance to steer it for his or her time in office. In my time so far, I have set out to ensure that all departments are moving in the same direction, to give momentum to the notion that our next generation deserves to be able to swim in our bay and our creeks, like so many of us did when we were young, to ensure that the things that we can do as a city to mitigate the impacts of climate change are taken care of on our watch. In Annapolis, with our focus on resilience and sustainability, it means ensuring that we are moving forward on flood mitigation. You probably all here have heard about our efforts on City Dock. That project is moving forward, tied to the rebuild of Hillman Garage. We have come up with a way to pay for the historic flood mitigation on City Dock without tapping taxpayers. Together, those two projects not only speak to the city with an eye towards strategies to build in resiliency, but also to the need for us to do this now. This is the largest municipal project in the city's history, and it fell to us to fix because we had kicked the can down the road for long enough. We are doing this. What we're doing is bold, but we have done it with an eye towards resilience, but also community buy-in. We listened to residents and business owners and moved forward only when we were able to reach consensus. I encourage you to check out our plans on our city website using the keyword City Dock. On the Compromise Street side, our resiliency strategy will involve pumping stations and a retrofit of the underlying stormwater system that will protect our historic buildings and nearby business. In improving water access because the more people interact with the Chesapeake Bay, the more likely they are to take care of it. We are working to either improve or upgrade more than 24 street end parks. We have 2 new parks that we are working on in our immediate future, Hawkins Cove in Eastport and the rework of Robert Eads Park on Clay Street across from the Morris Blum Senior Housing Centre. We've led the state with the most proactive tree and stormwater rules in the state. We're requiring 1-to-1 tree replacement and up to 125% stormwater treatment of development sites. We instituted a waterways cabinet, and we partner with nonprofits and communities in restoring our creeks, streams, and rivers. We led the country and the state in implementing a polystyrene ban, keeping styrofoam out of our waterways. The county and the state followed, but we are out front on these issues. We are working with partners like BG&E to install electric vehicles or EV charging stations at places that are convenient for residents and visitors. We have replaced all the city streetlights with LED lights, providing improved adjustable lighting that also offers significant reduction in the energy draw. We are moving to create more pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure to not only get people moving and out of their cars, but to reduce congestion for those people who still want to be in their cars. And one day those cars will all be electric. We have ongoing composting projects and plastic waste reduction campaigns that help our residents move towards zero waste goals. We need residents to do their part too. And that is why we had an online campaign in April that we called 30 Ways in 30 Days, where we asked residents to do the simple things like choose native species in their garden, reduce food waste by making a meal plan, reduce single-use plastic, and more. The City of Annapolis wants to be responsive and proactive in making Annapolis a greener city. I know that those of you who tuned into this broadcast will want to join us, and I encourage you and your families and your friends to please get involved. Sustainability and the environment have long been a passion for our city council member from Ward 7, and he has been an inspiration to me in this job and a true partner. So I would like to turn things over now to Alderman Rob Savage.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, for those remarks, and thank you, Bob, for moderating this. And so, yeah, I like Bob, where you started off talking about some of the local politics, because I think the local realm is really a great place to make change, where we can really get with our neighbors, work with our neighbors, and make a difference. And it's often difficult nationally or even on the state level. But as the mayor said, we've really been able to be at the forefront of setting the standard for an environment in many regards. When we passed the Forest Conservation Act, which I'll get into a little bit, when we passed the strongest in the state, that really has become an issue on the state now. So, but for this Earth Day, I think I want to try to give my perspective as a legislator, policymaker. And I think we need to start to look at how far we've come, so we have perspective moving forward, and also look at where we are today with the state of our environment. And then finally, look to where we need to go for tomorrow. And as the mayor has said, we have come very far. I think now about 2 decades ago, we first started to really raise the alarm on the forest loss in the city, and the potential forest loss at properties like Crystal Spring or the Reserve at Quiewaters. And combined, they would have totaled probably around 50 acres of lost forest. And that obviously would come with quite a bit of a cost to our air quality and water quality. And We spoke out in terms of how that growth, the development in the city was really being done in an unsustainable way. We were losing acres of forest, gaining acres of impervious surface. Our waterways were, and unfortunately still are, but on the impaired waters list. And so after seeing all of this, we were spurred to action. And look what that action has accomplished. We passed, as I said, the strongest Forest Conservation Act in the state, closing loopholes that allowed for unchecked forest loss by instituting a no-net loss policy. With staff's help, we passed the strongest critical area laws in the state, ensuring that even the intense development areas have to adhere to high environmental standards, and ensuring that the critical area laws also strive for a no-net loss of our valuable resources in those areas. And in partnership with our local nonprofit groups and organizations, we've designated all of our waterways as a no discharge zone, pending final federal approval. We strengthened our stormwater management laws to require that new development and redevelopment have to treat more than the minimum. So 75% for new development, 125 for redevelopment. And actually, I think I have those backwards. But in any case, it's a clear improvement from the minimum that we have in the state law. And in practice, that gets kind of close to a no-net increase in impervious surface. But we still have more work to do on that front. And then there's climate change and sea level rise. We have in the past performed a number of studies, such as our cultural and historical preservation study to figure out the impacts on those resources. We've assessed our risk, especially downtown, to sea level rise. And I think it's a huge achievement that we've been able to secure, in many regards, thanks to the mayor's leadership, to secure the creation of this resilience authority that we had to get from the state. And I think this will all enable us to engage in that. Well, that in particular will allow us to engage in this public-private partnership to greenlight projects that would cost a lot more than we have the ability to pay for on our own. And I like how the current proposal is to have it be at no cost to the taxpayer. So all of these initiatives were passed with or near unanimous support from the mayor and the council. And I think that really, as the mayor said, again, shows the commitment that this council has to, and the mayor have to this issue and to improving our environment. So now I want to look a little bit in terms of where we are currently. And this is going to be my downer section, I guess. But I think while we did just pass all these laws, and I think they do need a chance to show the results, it's important to clarify what the state of our environment is here in the city currently. As we feared decades ago, we are still losing our forest canopy. This has been confirmed, I think, as will become public soon, by a recent tree canopy study. And yes, the no-net loss law that we passed will make a difference, and it already has made a difference. As we can see on the Crystal Spring property, instead of losing what would have been 20, 30 acres, they have to replace whatever they take down and mitigate it. But that law only applies to projects over an acre in size. And yes, we've strengthened the critical area laws, but those only apply to our shoreline properties. So what's in the middle? We have residential and street trees. Unfortunately, we still see residents removing these very large canopy trees, both legally and illegally, in their back and side yards. We still see street trees being slated to be removed by development projects, and future planting sites being built over. And regarding our water quality, we're still seeing an increase in impervious surfaces, still seeing impaired waterways with less than ideal water quality. We're seeing more frequent storm events that have a higher intensity, which our infrastructure and our streams really can't handle. And we're seeing more frequent flooding events downtown, and the structures in the roadways are starting to become inundated occasionally. And this situation is still dire, and I think the metrics really prove that. And again, I'm not trying to be too much of a downer here, but I am trying to make the point that we have to continue moving forward to do more. And we have to fight against any effort to roll back these achievements. And I think, yes, we've passed laws to address many of the issues I mentioned, but not all. And I think we do need to, again, give these laws some time to work, see where we might need to make adjustments, and to translate this legislative action into implementation and enforcement. Because the question of implementation is why we adopted the new environmental performance standards. We did that last year, I believe, and also standards for the various, so those standards are for the various city departments that have environmental aspects to them. And the question of implementation is why we created the Deputy City Manager for Sustainability and Resilience. So are these laws being fully implemented? Do they need to be tweaked? What other gaps do we need to fill? So there's a lot more we need to do to address those questions. It's not just, you're past the law and you're done. So I'm hopeful that what we have passed is going to set us on a path to start climbing out of the environmental hole that we were in. So that brings me to really talk about where we go from here. I mentioned kind of moving towards the implementation phase, closing some of the loopholes. And I think we need to do more than just set goals. We had a tree canopy goal that was set, again, about 2 decades ago. We have yet to meet that goal, and actually going in reverse at this point. We had impervious surface reduction goal, and that we weren't able to meet either. We had a climate reduction goal, and I think this one we may actually be getting more closer to meeting. And we may have actually met it. I'm trying to get this confirmed, but in large part from the solar farm that was moved to completion by the mayor out at the Waterworks Park. But again, there's more we need to do even on that front to get to carbon neutrality by 2050. So let's go through some of the issues in terms of next steps, at least things that I have on my radar that I'd like to bring to the council would be, in terms of forests, I think we need to ensure that any tree in the city over 24 inches requires a permit to be removed, so that staff can say to the residents, in certain situations, push them to find different options that can potentially protect the tree, because the trees are often a community resource. We need to ensure that new development protects these large canopy trees no matter the size of the development, and that they partner with the city to create green streets. In terms of water quality and stormwater, we need to update our stormwater management and sediment control laws to adapt to the increased frequency and intensity of storms that we have these days. We also need to figure out how to get these older properties that predate our stormwater laws to install some kind of treatment on their properties. And an example is Watergate Village or Spot Cove Apartments, these large complexes that have zero stormwater treatment or management. And I think that's something we've chatted about, trying to figure out a way forward on. In terms of climate change, I think this is one of the overarching issues that connect the need to protect our tree canopy as a carbon sink, and also the need to update our laws to respond to changing storm patterns. As was mentioned, I think by the May, we need to transition to electric vehicle future. Emissions from our diesel buses is one of our primary contributors to greenhouse gases in the city. And as a small city, I think we can really shift to a smaller model. We also need to make changes for the residents so that residents will have the infrastructure to charge their vehicles. I've already had a couple of residents approach me about that. So climate change is really an existential threat for us. I'm glad the mayor spoke to a lot of what's being done downtown. And I think there are other areas we need to look to expand to in the future. That would be looking to do risk assessments in all of the waterfront areas, and including the east side of Eastport and the area around my ward, around Back Creek, which are also going to be impacted by sea level rise. Because I'd really think the city, there is a resiliency plan that's getting worked on. And I think we really need to at some point make sure that the plan includes a clear layout of actions that we need to do in the future in terms of how much they'll cost, when we need to take X, Y, or Z action, really so we can start to get a handle on what exactly we need to do to face this threat. And another issue, I think we need to pass the comprehensive plan. That's one of a huge undertaking that we have, and that's currently undergoing, I think, public review. But that's also a great opportunity. And I think a comprehensive plan can really support and enable this green path forward. And while, again, we've approved these comp plans in the past that had very admirable goals, but I think some of the implementation was lacking. There were oftentimes as well contradictory goals. For example, some that are advocating more growth, which requires clearing of trees and the creation of impervious surface, while at the same time advocating to increase our tree canopy and reducing our carbon footprint or improving our water quality. So I think if we get some more synergy between a lot of those goals in the comp plan, that'll make it better going forward, and for the council and the mayor going forward too, in terms of drafting legislation based on that. And so this is, again, every 10 years. So this is a great opportunity for us to get this done this right. I think it's going to come through a vote either late this year or early next year. So to wrap things up, I think now is clearly not the time to put in brakes on our efforts. I think we definitely need to be, we should definitely be proud of what we've done as a community. And I think we do need to make some adjustments, but I don't think we can afford to take steps backwards at this point. To get to the finish line on all these issues, I think we need to have continued collaboration between the mayor, the council, our boards and commissions, nonprofits, and the community. You know, we need the mayor's leadership. We need the council's policy and regulatory changes. We need staff's implementation. We need our commissions, such as the Environmental Commission's advice and recommendations. We need the advocacy, restoration, and education from the nonprofit community, who's doing a tremendous amount of work. They're doing more restoration than the city is. And the city's building up to it. We're going to catch up. But we also need a diverse participation from all sectors of the public to be successful, as I'm sure Mr. Rao will get into. But for today, on Earth Day, and with all of our partners, I'm really optimistic that we can continue to move forward to a greener tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Randy.
Hello, everybody. So happy to be here. What's up, Mayor Buckley? What's going on, Mr. Savage? And greetings, Bob. Welcome. And such an honor to be here. I'm very excited to have lunch. I'm fasting right now, so I'm not really eating much. Got my water here. Doing a lot of water. But yeah, I think we've had, the city of Annapolis has had a lot of great success in regards to putting people in positions of power who have decision-making capabilities, that have an interest for some of our more underrepresented populations and communities. That's very important because that's been a real challenge in some of our environmental outreach and our engagement work that's being done nationally and globally. So I think that it's really important. Also have had some strengths in our ability to track and be very transparent about the health and the quality of our environmental systems as it relates to Chesapeake Bay's waterways, and also some of our more public health needs, and just, connecting the two worlds of environmental outreach and engagement and things like safety in communities. The rate at which people hear gunshots is an environmental issue. I mean, these are all issues that kind of tie into that. So I think that having that scope really helps with how we are able to brainstorm and create different opportunities and programs. Also, just resources. I think that in the last 3 or 4 years, it's been more of an opportunity to particular resources as it relates to funding for particular projects that may address or or deal with outreach in more diverse communities. So I think that that's also a very good success. Going forward, I think that one thing that would be really helpful in some of the work that we're doing all together, and also at the grassroots level, is just being able to get a better handle on finding adequate and stable funding, which has been an issue in some of the grassroots level work, as well as adequate and committed leadership. So, again, putting people in positions that are from particular communities that you are maybe looking to be most vulnerable to climate change and most vulnerable to a lot of environmental issues, and as well as providing more adequate organizational buy-in. It's very important that a lot of these communities that we are seeking to do a lot of these environmental outreach and engagement and getting them to understand what sustainability is, right? I spent some time in India in 2017 gathering some data on a case study about how to build capacity among citizens to create a workforce and to create capacity to solve environmental issues. And environmental literacy became a very big issue because in the Hindu language, there isn't even words in the lexicon for certain environmental sustainability practices and best management techniques that we're trying to introduce. So again, swirling that back to our state in Maryland, the first state to actually have a public mandate for environmental education, environmental literacy. It's very important that we brand and shape and form a lot of our public-facing curriculum and educational activities in a way that is relatable to some of our diverse populations and underrepresented communities. So I think that's something we definitely want to pick a touch on. And three more things: the ability, increasing our ability to communicate across race, class, gender, and cultural lines. I think that's very important because a lot of times we have people in positions of power who are creating the systems and the education and outfacing and the platforms and a lot of the infrastructure. But if there's a disconnect with how some of this public-facing information is output, and as well as developmental aspects, it can create some challenges. So, and then also institutionalizing diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. I think that that's been being done within the work within the Environmental Commission, having created the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Environmental Justice report that comes out, that's presented by me monthly. And things we talk about are ways we can bridge some of these gaps as far as maldistribution of wealth and resources for minority-owned businesses and minority business enterprise, and just trying to figure out ways to contract more diverse workers in the workforce to bid or to put in for environmental construction type small work. And by doing this, you're able to increase the quality of life for certain populations, as well as introduce them to a wealth source that they can also help feed their families with, but also be helping the environment as well. So if we're talking about having very aggressive goals in regards to our sustainability in the city of Annapolis, we need to simultaneously be having a discussion about creating a very robust workforce development training programs where we are creating not just individuals to do $15 an hour environmental restoration work, but as well as entrepreneurs and people that can do, create their own entire engine within themselves. And I think that could be also very good. And then translating diversity training into action. So putting together plans to government workers, staff workers, environmental agency workers, like the Chesapeake Bay Trust and the Alliance of Chesapeake Bay and many others, aligning them with particular training so that their executive and administrative staff who have the decision-making capabilities can understand how some of these DEIJ activities take form from the administrative level. So I think that's very important to get the work, get the staff and get the administrators that extra help in regards to identifying unconscious biases and stereotypes and just really understanding the language. Because again, the communicative piece is very, very good, very, very important. And then also lastly, just continuing to work with our existing partners and then also looking at some new avenues for new partnerships that may help to all of us achieve our goal.
Randy, that's great. A lot of that I'd never heard of, and it's terrific to get caught up on that. People are anxious to get their questions answered now. I know Mitchell Stevenson has been taking questions as they come in on Facebook. And I've got quite a few that people have sent to me directly. So I think Mitchell and I will alternate them. The ones I have, I break down into 6 categories. So Mitchell, you can think about where yours fit in. Trees, stormwater, water access, electrification, green jobs, and a comprehensive plan. And it may not come as a surprise to those of you who listen to the back and forth in the environmental community in town, that through at least some of these questions, there seems to be a theme of cynicism. Can you imagine that? It's not so much, what have you accomplished? What do you plan to accomplish? But okay, you've done that, but how do we know it's really going to happen? How do we know it's going to make a difference? And so I'll just take the first one on trees and give you some of the things that they seem to be concerned about, and we can see who would like to contribute. So do we have an updated tree plan for the city? What are we doing to improve enforcement of illegally cutting and enforcement of mitigation rules? Are we auditing mitigation to make sure it actually gets done? Are there funds available for removal of invasive species that threaten trees, like ivy? Is there funding for the planting that we need to do to meet our canopy goals? And why, if we're so sensitive to these issues, do the city work crews continue to build mulch mountains around trees on public property? Anyone like to go first? Gavin, anything you want to tackle there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I don't know about mulch mounds, so someone will have to educate me on that. But I think Rob probably is better on this subject. I think, enforcement has been one of the things. We have one person in that position, and he's incredibly overworked. And I would encourage the rest of the council to give these departments some capacity so that we can have more effective enforcement. I believe we should increase the fines for people that do such things, but right now it's basically dealt with as it's reported. We can't be in all places at all times, so we do count on people who are on the ground to sort of guide us towards that. We have obviously a fund for tree planting that we make a development pay into. I'm sure we have more money and more need for trees than we have locations currently. Maybe Rob Savage can elaborate.
And Randy, you're very interested in planting trees too, I think.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned about I'm just one of the partners and a visionary founder of Replant. I mean, it was a vision that we had brought to the council, the commission. But yeah, we had a tree launch just yesterday down Robinwood. Mayor was there. And, I was very impressed by the mayor's understanding of sustainability. I never knew how in-depth and passionate he was about that. So that's
there was just sorry to interrupt. There was just a story I heard out of Baltimore. This connects tree planting and environmental justice, of how they went around Baltimore in the summer, or maybe it was another city, and took temperatures, took ambient air temperature readings. And in the disadvantaged areas of the city, the ambient air temperatures in the summer were as much as 10 degrees hotter than in the wealthier sections of the city.
Right.
So that's part of the goal, I guess, is in replanting, is to try to mitigate some of those differences.
Yeah, it's really interesting, man. I've been all over the world studying trees. I was just in St. Lucia a few weeks ago there studying the exotic trees and creating a relationship with I went there to meet the Minister of Tourism there to talk about an international exchange program for youth where they would go to St. Lucia to travel to learn about careers in trees and the exporting of trees and things like that. But yeah, trees are the number one thing to curb and reduce climate change and the warming of our planet. And so it's a really unique relationship that trees have with our natural environment. And not only that, it's a really good means to connect with people. You can name trees after people who had a great legacy in our communities in a way to connect the cultural and the legacy aspect and the legacy building aspect into environmental restoration. So there's a great bit of capacity there. Panel discussions where you bring on professionals to talk about issues. And even just the whole idea of increasing and gathering and harnessing an entire workforce that you can use to actually continue the work that we aggressively seek to do.
Great. Rob, do you want anything else to add on trees? I'm sure you do.
Yeah. And kind of to touch on first, I guess, the first question or issue you mentioned regarding some of the cynicism. I think that's something, I'm very conscious about. I was totally there many years ago, when I did blow the whistle on the city, that was because we saw some improper implementation of the laws. And so that's certainly something that I'm very well aware of and really trying to address. And that's where, and I know the mayor's been receptive and responsive to that. And that's why we have that joint proposal to create this position for the deputy city manager for resilience and sustainability, is because that position being in the city manager's office really gives that position the authority to work directly with the staff because we have environmental staff scattered about all the departments really, but it gives that position the ability to really make sure that things are being implemented in the way that the council and the mayor and city manager are envisioning. And so I think that's also why we passed I mentioned the performance standards. And that's where I think thanks to that was started recently by the city manager in terms of the performance standards for the departments. And, again, the council, mayor, city manager were all receptive to adding in performance standards specifically for these programs to make sure we can look at, for example, how many fines are issued, how many fuel correction notices are issued for projects, how much forest is being cleared, how much is being planted, things that really we need the council and I think ultimately the city manager needs to look at to figure out if these programs are working or need to be tweaked. But I also think it's, in terms of the cynicism, I think it's also the way to address that is really, it has to be a multi-pronged approach. We need, as I mentioned, we need the mayor, we need the council, we need all these community groups to have a partnership. And besides having the laws, that's why we have performance standards. We have to get the staff in place. And so it's certainly something we're working towards. In terms of the specific questions, we do have a canopy plan that's being worked on. And I think that's going to be try to be rolled into the comp plan this year, if I'm not mistaken. But I know we just had a report this week that is in progress. And that's where I got some of the data about the canopy has shrunk over the past, I can't remember when the last survey was done, but I think it's been around 10 years or more. So in terms of the enforcement, like you mentioned, Bob, that's a big issue. We're still working on that. I think, as the mayor said, we need to try to revisit what our enforcement staff looks like, because that's, we've received a number of complaints about trees getting cut down, pollution at some of the work sites, and there's only one guy going around to all of this. And so I think that's one thing that will help with the performance standards as we get into it, to see if we need to identify money to improve that. In terms of the auditing and mitigation, that's some of that's built into the regulations themselves. Like that has to be done for the forest conservation. That has to be done for the critical area laws. And so, but one thing we did look at, I'm fairly certain we did, is we extended the maintenance period for some of the new tree plantings to make that a longer period. So, essentially it ensures the trees for a longer period of time. And regarding invasive species removal, I think there's some money. That's another achievement I think of that we've had recently, is that we have an agreement now, thanks to Ms. Guild, that with the Critical Area Commission, where we can use those mitigation monies. For years, developers have been paying into this mitigation bank and fund, and so we can use that for some of these other purposes. And I think that money might be able to be used for removing invasive species, at least in the critical area.
Okay.
And we could.
I think we better move on to another question. We'll end up spending all of our time on trees. Mitchell, would you like to go with the next?
I just wanted to give you two things. First of all, you have 14 minutes left.
Yep.
Second thing was Jackie should probably come forward and unmute herself, because some of these questions will probably be addressed to her.
Yeah, sure. And do you have would you like to pose the next question or two, Mitchell?
Yeah, I have these from Facebook. Susan Stork Wheatley said she has a concern about a property.
Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you.
She has a concern about a property on the corner of Monticello and Brook that is planned to be developed. On that property are 10 to 12 trees that she fears will be taken down.
What was the corner?
Monticello and what?
Brook.
That's a Ward 1, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's my neighborhood. I'm not familiar with that project, so.
Who should she call, Mr. Mayor? Who should this person call?
She start with the mayor's office, and then we'll get we'll get you to the right place. Right? So.
Well, the city forester, Brian Adams, will review that plan. And if anyone's concerned that those trees are coming down imminently, they should call Brian Adams. He's in planning and zoning.
Okay. Mitchell, you got some more there?
I do have some more. We have a fire truck going by. That was a little loud. Sorry about that. Diane Butler says that Watergate Village has trees that help manage storm water. Many were cut down without permits on or about March 17th. We look forward to the city taking action to enforce our tree law by making the owners replace each tree removed. That's not really a question, but I thought Jackie might want to address that.
Jackie?
You said that's at Watergate Apartments?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So when trees are taken down without a permit, they're usually reported again to planning and zoning, where Brian Adams, the city forester, works. And Brian, unfortunately, they're down without a permit and we don't know about it. What happens is that there's a fine imposed, and depending on the size of the tree, the fine can triple. If it's a very large tree, will require mitigation for 3 trees. So sometimes it's 2 trees or 1. It depends on the size of the tree taken, and the fine is per tree. So if it's a very large tree that would require replanting of 3 trees, the person responsible would be required to do that if possible, and if not, to pay the fine, which sometimes can be triple. So, again, as Mayor Buckley has pointed out, we have one city forester right now who can't be everywhere. And we do really rely on residents when they see trucks coming in and they don't know if there's a permit or not, to contact the city forester so that he can immediately investigate, either prevent it from happening if it's not permitted, or supply the resident with the information about the permit.
Would it help for them to get their cameras out and take some video?
Absolutely. It's always helpful.
Great. Let me try one. Water access. The mayor mentioned this, a couple of projects that are in the works. But right now, as many of you know, there's a bunch of our friends in Eastport are particularly concerned about 2 projects, the South Annapolis Yacht Club and Wells Cove. And again, with a couple of the comments seem to suggest that it's absolutely clear this is legally enforceable public access. What's taking so long to make this happen?
So, a legal opinion is a legal opinion, right? So we have lawyers on staff who have a legal opinion on the way the city has to approach this. Other lawyers might have a different legal opinion. The other lawyers don't work for us. We have 4 lawyers on staff who have reviewed. I'm not ever going to give up on Wells Cove. We're going to get it done. It might be a long journey, right? We are not going to ever give up on the South Annapolis Yacht Centre. We will get water access there too. We will get water access at Hawkins Cove. We'll get water access at Robert Eads Park. We will get, we have so many projects that weren't even on the table before that have happened in Rob and I's term. We'll create a park. We believe we got a really good shot at saving the last piece of Cars Beach on Edgewood Road. Obviously, the Crab Boating Centre had a big buy-in from the city through Rob's leadership. That's another great water access point. We are working to develop a program for the rowing centre on College Creek. We think we have a really good shot at that, having a great gateway park on Roe Boulevard as you come into the city, with College Creek being activated by rowers and paddleboarders and kayakers. It's a great piece of still water that really could be activated in multiple places around College Creek. Waterworks Park, the dam at Waterworks Park is another great example of people getting water access to that. And the new pool is a brand new, first-class facility that people have access to the water there in a different form. But it's a huge priority for us. We live here because of the water. It's one of the things that identifies us as a city. I come from a country where you can't have private property on the waterfront. It is interesting to me that there's so much privatization of the waterfront here. An example of that is my kids, when they were being taught to swim or doing swim classes at school, my kids could swim, but it was amazing to me how over half the kids couldn't swim in their classes at school. And yet those kids, and we are all surrounded by water, but we've had our access to the waterfront cut off. There used to be a time when all you did is jump off the pier and fish and crab and boat and all those sorts of things. That has been limited because we've limited access. So a high priority for me is to make sure that we create as much access as possible. And there's nothing in my actions have shown that. All of our hands get tied by a legal process and lawyers and different things like that. But we'll fight for every piece of water access we can, and we currently are.
I sense that there is some resistance in some communities from the nearby residents, and I don't understand that. I live less than 100 feet from Amos Garrett Park, and that's a well-used, well-loved park, and it's absolutely not a problem for me or for my neighbors. To have it well-used like that, I think I hear stories from 20 years ago when there were dark deeds going on there, but I think now that it's been nicely renovated and used all the time by kayakers and people just sitting on the pier and taking in the fresh air and the view of the water, that it's probably actually a safety feature in the neighborhood. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, and Mitchell will have another question, I think.
Well, not to mention the fact that access for a lot of kind of, more diverse communities, it becomes a real issue because of the culture of what's going on in the world today. You have people saying things, well, do you live here? Where do you live? What's your address? And things escalating quickly, and people actually even losing their life just for being, in the wrong area at the wrong time and at the wrong water access area, or any access area for a street or road or community or park for that nature. So I think that that's also something to really consider, is the fact that for some of these other communities, mainly like hacker communities, maybe, it's a little bit trickier for them to figure out how to get to water access. It's not just like, just go over there. It's just, it's a little bit trickier than that. I think.
Well, Randy, that's a great segue. That's a great segue to Hawkins Cove, Randy, because that's a HACA property right above it. There's the Harbor House and the Eastport Terrace properties right there. And the mayor has made a major priority of Hawkins Cove to restore that to a state and to put in water access there so that all the surrounding communities, and many of them are low-income underrepresented communities, have water access and can enjoy that area.
And to make sure that the residents are part of the process. I think that, if you can get a kid to help you build something or plant something or get connected to nature, they will take ownership of that. It'll be their place. They'll want to share it with others. They'll want to protect it. And that's really something that we need to make a huge, huge priority out of.
And even with the maintenance as well, creating a workforce right there from that community that could, for the years to come, be in charge of maintenance on that site. And if there is a lack of that workforce, maybe we could, there could be some trainings that could take place to encourage.
It does a lot of things. It does training and employment. It does awareness. It's terrific. I think we might have time for one more.
I'm going to give you a 5-minute warning here.
One more question from you, Mitchell.
Wow, there's so many to choose from. Noise pollution is a concern. Rooftop air conditionings have been an issue to surrounding homes on West Street. Can you talk about noise pollution?
Gee, I don't know who to turn to. Volunteers?
Well, I mean, noise pollution is a real, I had a talk with a guy recently. He was telling me about how noise affects nature, right? And there's these decimals that you have to stay under. I think it's 8 or something like that, 0.8 or something. And at a certain noise level, you run away all the wildlife and all of the nature and things like that. So I don't know what much nature exists on West Street, but I wonder if they were referring to nature or they're referring to just themselves hearing too much noise.
Rob's got a finger in the air.
Well, I think noise, it is an issue around here. And I think, as we shift to electric vehicles, that will hopefully a large part of that will go away, especially as we move transition some of the buses away. But, I've had complaints about air conditioning units and things like that causing a lot of noise. But I think, the way to address that is often through creating green barriers of some kind, vegetative barriers.
And there is an abuse happening at one of the bigger properties on West Street that we are dealing with in the city, that their generator or one of their mechanical pieces is disturbing the neighborhood. So we are working on that now, but, it's taken longer than we like.
Is there a noise ordinance that applies to things like machinery?
I think that this thing goes on at abnormal times, or I believe. I'm not really familiar with it, but we're working with the management to get that taken care of.
And who would an affected resident call about a noise problem?
You can always start in the mayor's office, and then we redirect you. Hillary, the ombudsman for the city, Hillary Raftovich is a great person to sort of get you to the right resources. But I'm pretty sure we're talking about a specific issue here with Park Place. Yeah.
Well,
another issue. There's another issue with light pollution, and but we have with our new street lights that BG&E has put in, they can control the light, and there were some complaints from residents, and they can control that remotely even at night and redirect the direction of the light so that it doesn't go into people's bedroom windows or right into their living room. So BG&E is working with us on a Connected Communities project for all sorts of different things, but light can be controlled as well.
Okay. Well, we're going to keep this train running on time. We've got less than a minute left. I want to thank Mark and Mitchell for working on the technical side of things. Thanks to Jackie, Randy, Rob, and Gavin for being here and for all the work you're doing for the city every day. And thanks to everyone who is watching and sending your questions, for sharing your Friday with us. Everybody have a great weekend. I hope we'll be able to do this again sometime.
We want to say a big thank you to you, Bob, for all your decades of tireless work, thankless work for the environment. You've made this city so much better. So thank you.
Never
Thanks,
thank
Bob.
us. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Bob.
Thanks, everybody.
See you, Jackie.